Colombia in the 1990s was drowning in chaos. The Medellin cartel was at war with the government. Guerrilla armies were fighting for territory. The country was bleeding. In this chaos, while everyone was looking at the drug cartels and the violence of organized crime, a different kind of predator was moving through the shadows. His name was Luis Garavito. He called himself a vagrant, a man nobody noticed. But in reality, he was the most prolific serial killer in the Western Hemisphere. He murdered over 140 children. Some estimates put the number at 300. This is his story, from poverty to predation to one of the longest prison sentences ever handed down. This is the story of La Bestia, the Beast. Luis Alfredo Garavito was born on January 25, 1957, in Genova, in the Quindío region of Colombia. This was coffee country, poor farming communities, manual labor. Poverty was the baseline. His family was poor even by local standards. His father was described as a womanizer and a drunk who spent more time with other women than with his own children. Garavito would later say his father was violent, brutal in his discipline. There were 7 children in the home, and the family was constantly fighting, constant arguing, constant chaos. The father beat the children. He beat Garavito specifically, often for minor infractions. By most accounts, the neighbors weren't much better. There are claims that neighbors sexually abused young Garavito. Garavito attended school at Simón Bolívar School, but he didn't stay long. Other children teased him, ridiculed him. He was isolated. He struggled with his studies. At 16, he left Genova. He was already broken by then, angry, damaged, carrying trauma that he would never process, never heal from, and eventually weaponize against others.
After leaving home, Garavito became a drifter. He moved between places, never staying long. He worked odd jobs when he could. He drank heavily. He developed a severe alcohol addiction that would follow him for the rest of his life. He was also struggling with untreated mental illness, depression, rage, psychological problems that had no outlet, no help, no medication. By the late 1970s, Garavito began offending against children. These were not murders initially. These were sexual assaults, molestation. He would target vulnerable children, street kids, poor kids, kids without parents watching closely. He would approach them, gain their trust, and then assault them multiple times, over and over. The incidents happened sporadically across different regions of Colombia. He would be arrested occasionally, detained briefly, then released. The system was overwhelmed. The police were dealing with cartels and violence and political upheaval. A man assaulting street children? That wasn't a priority. By 1980, Garavito had begun committing these offenses with regularity. Young boys aged 8 to 16, that became his target age. That was who he hunted. But assault wasn't satisfying anymore. By the early 1990s, something shifted. The violence inside him had reached a point where assault alone wasn't enough. He needed to kill. By 1992, Garavito had crossed the line from sexual predator to serial killer. Between October 1992 and April 1999, Garavito began murdering children across Colombia. The killing spree lasted 7 years. He would eventually confess to 140 murders, though the actual number was likely higher, possibly over 190, maybe even approaching 300. His method was consistent. He would move between cities, different regions. He'd spend time in one area, commit murders, then move on. This meant the deaths weren't clustered in one location. They were spread across Colombia, 11 different states, over 59 different cities. This fragmentation made investigation nearly impossible. When a child went missing in one city, the police there wouldn't know that dozens of similar cases had happened in other cities miles away. Garavito's victim selection was deliberate. He targeted the most vulnerable children, boys aged 8 to 16. Most were poor. Many were street children. To lure them, Garavito used disguise and deception. He would dress as a monk, as a priest, as an elderly man, as a disabled person needing help. He called himself El Cura, the priest, because that's how many victims identified him before they died.
He would approach a child and say he had work for them, money, food, small gifts. He would offer to take them for a walk, away from the populated areas, away from witnesses. Once alone, the mask came off. Garavito would tie the children up. He would rape them. He would torture them. He would keep them alive during the abuse, extending their suffering. Then, when he was finished, he would cut their throats, slit their necks. Quick deaths. After killing them, he would mutilate the bodies, cut them apart. He would cut off their fingers and toes deliberately to make it look like satanic cults were responsible. Most of his crimes happened when he was drunk. Investigators found empty alcohol bottles near victim sites constantly. Garavito would drink to lower his inhibitions, to give himself permission to do what his diseased mind wanted to do. Then he would act out these fantasies. He was remarkably efficient. He would commit a murder, leave the scene, and move on. No panic, no guilt, no remorse that showed. He was a machine. What made this possible was the environment he operated in. For 5 years, Garavito murdered with impunity, 1992 to 1997. By 1997, he had killed over 100 children. Then, in November 1997, construction workers near the city of Pereira made a horrifying discovery. They found a mass grave. When excavated, it contained 36 bodies. 36 young boys, all murdered, all mutilated, all showing signs of torture. The discovery jolted the Colombian government awake. Suddenly, they couldn't ignore this anymore. It was too big. 36 bodies in one grave meant this wasn't isolated crimes. This was a systematic operation. This was a serial killer operating at a massive scale. The government created a national task force. Multiple police departments were forced to work together. They began reviewing unsolved cases across the country. They started connecting murders that had previously been treated as isolated incidents. They realized there was a pattern, a man moving across the country, murdering young boys. But they still didn't have a suspect. They had a pattern and nothing else. Garavito continued murdering after the discovery. The task force was looking, but they were looking blind. They had no name, no clear description. They had body dumps and mass graves, but no way to find who was responsible. For another 2 years, he killed. On April 22nd, 1999, in the city of Villavicencio, Garavito attempted to rape a 12-year-old boy named John Ivan Sabagal. The assault was interrupted. Police arrived. Garavito ran. He was arrested, but he gave a false name, false identity. The police held him for attempted rape, but they didn't know who he actually was. He was just another man arrested for a crime, another prisoner in an overcrowded system. But the detective assigned to the case didn't give up. Detective Duran and his team suspected this might be connected to the serial killer they'd been hunting. They used a prison-wide eye exam. Garavito wore glasses. At the crime scenes where they'd found the mass grave, they'd recovered a pair of glasses. They compared Garavito's prescription to those glasses. It was a match. Confronted with the evidence, with the realization that they had finally caught him, Garavito's facade cracked. He admitted who he was. Then, over 12 hours of interrogation, he confessed. He told Detective Duran everything. He confessed to 140 murders. He confessed to the rapes, the torture, the mutilation. He confessed to the psychological games he played. And he did something unusual for a serial killer. He cooperated. He told them where the bodies were buried. He led them to grave sites. He drew maps in prison showing them exactly where they could find his victims. In total, approximately 140 confirmed bodies were identified and recovered from Garavito's crime sites. But investigators suspect the real number was higher. Based on the maps he drew in prison, some authorities believe the victim count could exceed 300. On October 28, 1999, 6 months after his arrest, Garavito confessed fully and completely. The 7-year manhunt for La Bestia was over. The Colombian legal system tried to do what it could, Garavito was charged with murders across multiple jurisdictions. The courts wanted to hold him accountable. They convicted him of 138 murders. Only 138 because many cases were still being investigated, still being processed. The sentence handed down was historic. The court calculated a total of 1,853 years and 9 days in prison. It was a symbolic number, the longest prison sentence ever handed down in Colombian history. A number so large it had no real meaning. No one lives that long. But it was the court's way of saying, this man's crimes are incomprehensible. But here's where Colombian law failed. The country has no death penalty. And more importantly, Colombian law at the time capped the maximum sentence any prisoner could actually serve at 30 years. Even though Colombia was sentenced to 1,853 years, he would only have to serve 30. Later, in 2006, because Garavito pled guilty and cooperated with authorities, helping them recover bodies, Colombian law allowed for a sentence reduction. His sentence was reduced to 22 years. This reduction sparked outrage. The nation was furious.
Garavito would serve only 22 years for murdering 140-plus children. The people of Colombia felt justice had been denied. Many argued he deserved either life imprisonment or the death penalty, but neither existed in Colombian law. After the 2006 reduction, laws were changed. The maximum penalty for serial murder in Colombia was increased to 60 years. Future serial killers would face harsher sentences. But Garavito had already been sentenced under the old law. Garavito died in prison on October 12, 2023 from cancer. He was 66 years old. He had served approximately 24 years in prison for murdering over 140 children. He never left prison. He never was released. But the question remains, did he deserve even 22 years when he murdered 140 people? Most people would argue no. Most would argue he should have faced life imprisonment or capital punishment. But that's not how Colombian law worked. The system that failed to catch him for 7 years also failed to properly punish him. The Beast of Colombia is dead, but his legacy is the 140-plus lives cut short, families destroyed forever, and the systemic lessons that came too late for his victims.